Arizona Territory, 1879. The sun was dying behind the Dragoon Mountains when Everett O'Bannon spotted the broken-down stable half hidden by mesquites and thyme. He had not planned to stop. His plan had been to ride west until the land felt less like memory and more like future. But his horse, Dutch, had thrown a shoe 2 miles back, and the wind carried a sound he could not ignore, something sharp and ragged. Not animal. Not wind. A cry. He dismounted, boots crunching dry earth, hand resting near his sidearm out of habit more than fear. The stable leaned like it had been forgotten for decades, boards warped and blackened by sun. But the door was ajar, and a flicker of motion caught his eye. Inside it was cooler. Dust hung in thick sheets. And there, huddled in the far corner beneath rotting rafters, was a woman. "Ma'am?" Everett kept his voice low but firm. She looked up fast, too fast. Her eyes were wide and wild, hair matted with dirt and sweat. A cut ran high on her cheekbone, dried blood flaking off. "Do not come closer," she said, voice hoarse. "I will not," Everett said. "You need help." She stared at him like she was trying to see through him. Then she lowered her head, holding her side. "I need water." He stepped back outside, grabbed his canteen, and returned. She did not move until he set it down a few feet from her. Then, on trembling limbs, she crawled to it and drank like she had been dry for days. "I am not here to hurt you," Everett said quietly. She nodded just once. "Someone else already did," she whispered. He crouched, not too close. "You got a name?" She hesitated. "Sierra. Sierra Grady." Everett gave a slow nod. "Everett O'Bannon." She looked up, then really looked at him. "You a lawman?" "No, ma'am." "Outlaw?" "No, then what are you?" He hesitated. "Just a cowboy trying to fix a busted horseshoe." Sierra gave a short, dry laugh that turned into a cough. "Well, you sure picked the wrong place to stop." "You here by chance?" he asked. Her face went still. "No. I ran." He did not press. Instead, he walked back out, fetched his saddlebag, and brought it inside. He unwrapped a piece of jerky, broke it in half, and held it out. She took it with shaking fingers. He stayed near the doorway that night, firelight flickering low between them. Sierra fell asleep hard, curled against old hay like a child too tired to cry. When dawn broke, Everett saw the truth clearer. She had been beaten. Her lip was split, wrist swollen, feet bruised from running barefoot through the desert. He saddled Dutch with care, leaving the shoe for later. "You cannot carry me," she said when he tried to lift her. "I am not leaving you here," he said. "You have 2 choices. Come with me or stay and die." She looked at him for a long time. Then, without a word, she let him lift her onto the saddle, her light frame barely adding weight. They rode slow, Everett walking beside the horse most of the way. "Just before noon," she whispered, "he left me there to die." Everett looked up. "Who did?" "My husband." Her voice cracked. "He said I was not worth the food, that he would rather keep the children." Everett froze. "Children?" She nodded. 2. A boy and a girl. Twins. 5 years old. "Where are they?" She looked at him, face lined with pain. "He took them." Everett's jaw tightened. "Where?" She shook her head. "We were headed west. He kept us moving. But I know the land. I think he was trying to reach a mining town called Benson." Everett exhaled slow. "You are sure?" She nodded again, tears starting now. "I need to find them." "We will," he said, voice steady. "We will get them back." They made camp beneath a rocky outcrop that night. Sierra did not speak much, but she watched him as he built the fire, as he handed her a blanket, as he checked the sky for weather. "You are not like him," she said suddenly. Everett looked up. "No, I am not." She nodded once. "Thank you." He gave her a tired smile. "You do not have to thank me." But she did. With her eyes. With the way her hand brushed his when he passed her the last of the jerky. With the way she leaned toward him as sleep took her again. The next day, they reached a small ranch settlement. Everett traded a few coins for a fresh horseshoe, then asked the blacksmith about a man traveling with 2 children. "Came through 2 days ago," the blacksmith said. "Mean-looking fella." The little girl was crying. He grabbed her hard. "I did not like the look of it." Everett's chest burned. He turned back and found Sierra watching him, her fingers white around the saddle horn. "We are close," he said. They rode faster now, urgency growing with each mile. Sierra barely spoke, but her eyes never stopped scanning the trail. Every time they paused, her fingers trembled, but she never asked to stop. Late the next evening, they reached the outskirts of Benson. The town was loud, dusty, full of miners and drifters. Everett left Sierra with a kind woman at the boarding house and walked straight to the sheriff's office. But the sheriff was drunk and uninterested. "Not my problem," he muttered. "Man wants to travel with 2 kids, that is his business." Everett's fists clenched. Not when he beats their mother and leaves her in the desert. The sheriff waved him off. "You got proof." "I have her." "Still not proof." Everett left before he did something he would regret. He walked back to the boarding house, heart pounding. Sierra was near the window, staring out. "He is here," she whispered. "I can feel it." He stepped closer. "We will find them. I swear it." She turned to him, eyes full of something sharp and raw. "Why are you helping me?" He did not answer right away. Then softly, "Because no one helped my mother. She ran too once. No one listened. She died alone." Sierra's gaze softened. She reached out and touched his hand. "You are not like most men. I do not want to be." They spent the night side by side on the floor, not touching, but close. The fear between them was real, but so was the pull. Everett could feel it, like something binding them, thread by thread. In the morning, a boy no older than 10 knocked on the door. "You lookin' for 2 kids?" he asked. Sierra stood, heart in her throat. "Yes, a boy and a girl. Twins. I saw them. Man had them locked in the back room of the saloon. Said he was their pa. But the kids cried a lot." Everett grabbed his coat. "Show me." The boy nodded and ran. Everett turned to Sierra. "Stay here." "No, I will not risk." She stepped forward. "They are mine. I am coming." He saw the fire in her eyes, and he nodded. They walked into the saloon together. Everett's hand hovered near his holster. Sierra's eyes scanned the room. Then there, a door at the back. A man sitting near it, drinking, filthy and sunburned. Her husband. Sierra froze. "That is him." Everett walked forward, slow and steady. The man looked up. "What the hell do you want?" "To take back what is not yours," Everett said. The man stood. "You got a death wish, cowboy?" "No. But you do." The draw was fast. Everett was faster. One shot. Shoulder. The man screamed and dropped. Sierra ran past him, through the door. 2 small bodies flew into her arms. "Mama!" the little girl cried. "Mama!" the boy echoed. Everett stepped inside after her, heart pounding. Sierra looked up at him, tears streaking her cheeks, arms full of her children. "You found us," she whispered. He knelt beside her. "No, we found each other." And in that moment, everything changed. The children clung to Sierra's skirts as Everett led them through Benson's quiet edge, away from the saloon's clatter and into the hush of early dusk. The boy, Eli, kept glancing up at Everett, wary but curious. The girl, Lottie, held tight to her mother's hand, her small face pale beneath sun-faded curls. They stayed that night in a narrow room above the general store, the only place with enough space for all of them. Sierra sat on the floor with her back against the wall, both children curled against her sides. Everett remained by the door, watching the hallway through the crack of light beneath it. Neither adult slept much. At dawn, Everett packed everything into his saddlebag, while Sierra wrapped the children in borrowed coats. They left the town behind with no farewell. The man who'd hurt her had been carried off to the jail with his arm torn open and his mouth full of slurs. But Everett had seen too many sheriffs look the other way once the bruises faded. He wasn't about to gamble the children's safety on a stranger's conscience. They rode east into low country, where cottonwoods lined shallow creeks and the land opened into long, wind-pressed flats. Everett led them to an old cabin he'd once helped raise for a widow near St. David. She had since passed, but the place still stood small, weathered, sturdy. Sierra stepped inside slowly, Lottie pressed to her hip. "There's warmth in the walls," she said, brushing her fingers over the doorframe. Everett knelt beside the hearth, checking the stones. "She was kind," he said. "Taught me how to bake bread without burning the roof off." Eli tested the floorboards with careful steps, as if the house might fold beneath him. "Can we stay?" Sierra looked to Everett. Her voice was quieter than the wind outside. "That depends." He met her eyes, steady. "I want you too." They stayed. The days stretched long and full. Everett rode into the settlement every third morning, trading for flour, beans, salt pork, and tobacco. Sierra scrubbed the hearthstone, aired out the quilts, stitched a shirt for Eli from fabric Everett found in a trunk. Lottie followed Everett like a shadow, her tiny boots thumping the earth behind him as he chopped wood or checked the fence posts. Late one afternoon, after the children had fallen asleep tangled together on the cot, Sierra stepped outside carrying a tin cup of weak coffee. She crossed the yard barefoot, skirts brushing her ankles, and sat beside Everett where he whittled by the fire. "You've done more than I can repay," she said. He kept his eyes on the wood in his hand. "That's not what I'm looking for." She studied him, her voice low. "Then what are you looking for?" He set the blade down and looked at her fully. "Something quiet. Something real." Sierra's gaze didn't waver. "I haven't had quiet in years. And real. I stopped hoping for that a long time ago." "You don't have to hope. You just have to let it come." That night, she fell asleep on a blanket beside the hearth. Everett stayed near the door as always, but his eyes kept drifting to the slow rise and fall of her breath, the way her hand curled beneath her cheek, how her brow, so often furrowed, now eased in sleep. Snow came early that year, just a thin dusting at first, then thicker storms that settled like silence across the hills. Everett built a sled for the children from scrap boards and rope. Lottie squealed as he pulled her across the frozen yard. Eli, slower to laugh, eventually joined in, his sharp eyes softening. Inside, Sierra baked hard biscuits and boiled root vegetables into stew. She hummed without realizing it, old melodies from her own mother's kitchen, long buried. Everett caught the tunes as he carved toys for the children: horses, birds, a small doll with walnut eyes. One evening, Eli fell asleep in Everett's lap, his head heavy against Everett's chest. Sierra watched from across the room, her hands still in the wash basin. When Everett carried the boy to bed, she followed him with quiet steps. "He trusts you," she said. Everett turned. "I didn't think he would." "He doesn't trust easily," she murmured. "Neither do I." He stepped closer, not touching, just close enough that she could feel his heat. "You don't have to say anything." Sierra's voice was steady but low. "I need to." She took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I want a life that doesn't need escaping." Everett's reply was quiet. "Then let's build one." She nodded once, her grip tightening for just a breath. In the weeks that followed, they fell into rhythm. Not fast, not sudden, just steady, like snow melting into earth. Everett taught Eli to saddle a pony he'd borrowed from the neighboring farm. Sierra helped Lottie thread a needle and stitch a patch into Everett's coat. At night, they all gathered near the fire, the children curled in blankets, Sierra's head resting against Everett's shoulder, his arm around her waist. No one spoke of what had come before. The past stayed behind them like footprints in snow already fading. One morning, as early light filtered through the shutters, Sierra reached for Everett's hand beneath the quilt. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. He kissed her temple, slow. "You don't ever have to be again." And in that hush, with the fire crackling low and their children breathing easy nearby, they began again, quietly, fully, and together. The first calf Everett brought home from the neighboring ranch had a crooked ear and a limp in its back leg. It wasn't worth much, but Sierra knelt beside it in the yard with a basin of warm water and cleaned its hooves like it was gold. Lottie crouched nearby, whispering to it. When the calf nuzzled her cheek, she laughed, a soft, short sound that hadn't existed in her before. Everett leaned against the fence, arms crossed. You thinking of keeping her in the house next? Sierra didn't look up. If she keeps letting Lottie sleep through the night, I might consider it. He watched the way her fingers moved, gentle, sure, the kind of touch that came from both tenderness and necessity. There was no fear in her shoulders anymore, no flinch behind her eyes. She wore her quiet like a choice now, not a shield. By mid-March, the snow had gone to mud and the creeks were running high. Everett turned the soil near the side of the house with a rusted plow he'd bartered for. Sierra and the children planted beans and squash in neat rows, Lottie trying to mimic her mother's motions with half the seeds ending up in her sleeves. One evening, Sierra came in from the garden with dirt on her forearms and a splinter in her palm. Everett sat her down at the table and worked it out with the tip of a clean knife. She didn't pull away. I used to think I'd never feel safe again, she said, watching his hands. But now there are mornings I forget to be afraid. He wrapped her hand in a strip of cloth. That's how you know it's real. When you stop noticing it. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder. You didn't have to stay. I didn't want to be anywhere else. In April, a letter arrived addressed to Everett. He opened it on the porch, Sierra watching from the doorway with a wet towel over her shoulder. The handwriting was stiff and formal, and by the time he reached the bottom, his jaw was tight. Bad news? Sierra asked. He folded the letter and tucked it into his coat. A man I rode with years ago died up near Flagstaff. Left a bit of land and no kin. Wrote my name down before he passed. Sierra stepped outside, drying her hands. Will you go? He met her eyes. Not unless you were fixin' to come with me. She nodded once. Then let's go. They left the next week, after securing the cabin with boards and leaving the animals in the care of a trusted neighbor. The children rode in the wagon Everett hitched behind Dutch, bundled in blankets and laughing at every bump in the road. Sierra sat beside Everett, her hand on his knee, the wind playing with the ends of her hair. The land near Flagstaff was high and pine-covered, the air thinner and cooler. They found the property tucked into a slope, a modest house with a slanted roof and a barn that leaned toward the trees. Inside, dust covered everything, but the bones of the place were good. Sierra ran her hand along the windowsill. Feels like another beginning. Everett stood in the center of the room. It's ours if we want it. Lottie and Eli ran through the empty house, their voices echoing. Sierra turned toward Everett, her face open and tired and full of something new. We do want it. That night, Everett built a fire in the hearth while Sierra laid the children down on straw pallets. They sat on the floor with their backs against the wall, the firelight flickering across their faces. Sierra touched the edge of Everett's sleeve. You ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't passed that stable? He looked into the flames. Every day. She leaned into his side slow. I stopped praying a long time ago. But I think someone else was praying for me. Everett rested his hand over hers. Maybe. Or maybe we just found each other when we were finally ready. She tilted her head, her voice barely above the crackle of the fire. I'm not scared of the future anymore. He turned toward her, eyes steady. Then let's build it. And there, in a stranger's house destined to become their home, Sierra kissed him for the first time, no trembling, no need for words. Just warmth and promise, and the quiet certainty of something earned. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a breath held and finally released. The barn roof gave in 2 weeks after the thaw. Sierra had stepped out barefoot into the yard, a tin pail in one hand, just in time to see the weight of spring rain pull the timber down in a slow, groaning collapse. Lottie screamed from the porch. Everett dropped the fence rail he'd been lifting and sprinted across the field. No animals had been inside. They'd kept the livestock under the lean-to while Everett worked at reinforcing the main structure. Still, Sierra's heart kicked hard against her ribs as she stood staring at the heap of sodden wood and rusted nails. Everett stopped beside her, mud up to his knees. You all right? She nodded, hand tight around the pail handle. That wasn't what I expected to see this morning. He gave a quiet exhale. It was bound to go. I just hoped it'd wait until after the roof patch. Lottie called to them, voice high with worry. Sierra turned and waved, her hand steady. "We're fine, baby. Back inside now." When the girl ducked through the door, Everett leaned closer. "There's a man near Walnut Canyon who mills timber. I'll ride out tomorrow and see what he can spare." Sierra looked back at the wreckage. "We'll need more hands." "That's too much for one." "I'll ask around at the post," he said. "Might be some young ones looking for trade." That night, Sierra sat on the porch with her sewing in her lap, but the needle hung still in her hand. Everett came out with 2 mugs of water and passed her one without a word. She looked up, eyes tired but clear. "I used to think a roof coming down meant the whole house would follow." He sat beside her, elbows on his knees. "It doesn't. I know that now," she said. "But knowing it and feeling it, those don't always arrive together." He tilted his head toward her. "You're allowed to feel both." Her hand found his on the bench between them. "When you leave tomorrow, take the rifle. That last fox came too close to the pen." "I will." He paused. "Eli's been watching the traps. He's careful." "He has your steadiness," she said. Everett looked toward the tree line, where dusk pooled in purple shadows. "He's finding his footing. Both of them are." Sierra traced her thumb along his knuckles. "So am I." The next morning, Everett left before dawn, saddle creaking under him as he rode west toward the canyon. Sierra stood at the edge of the yard and watched until he vanished between the pines. Eli joined her, a small coil of rope slung over his shoulder. "Should I check the snares?" he asked. She nodded. "Take the dog and stay near the creek." After he left, she brought Lottie inside and set her up with weaving strips of cloth into a rag rug. The little girl worked quietly, tongue pressed between her teeth in concentration. The silence was peaceful, but Sierra's mind kept drifting to the barn, to Everett's back disappearing into the trees, to the way her life had narrowed into something solid and unexpected. By late afternoon, Eli returned with 3 rabbits and a muddy grin, the dog panting at his heels. Sierra praised him without fuss, helped him skin the catch behind the house, and set a pot on the fire. When Everett came back, the sun was low. His coat was damp with sweat and rain, his jaw shadowed with dust. But when she opened the door, he smiled, not broad, not bright, but like something that had waited all day to settle. "I found your timber," he said, stepping inside. "He's willing to barter if we help him clear the south bend of his land." Sierra handed him a cloth to wipe his face. "We can do that. I told him we'd come tomorrow. You all right with that?" She nodded. "Eli wants to learn. He's ready." Everett glanced toward the back room where the children were reading together on the floor. "He's got a good heart." "So do you," she said. He turned back to her, gaze steady. "You've given me cause to use it." Later, after supper, after the children had curled beneath quilts with bellies full of stew, Everett and Sierra sat on the floor by the fire. She leaned against him, shoulder to shoulder, her arm resting across his thigh. "I used to think a life like this was something other women got," she said. "Women who hadn't been broken." Everett didn't speak. He just turned his hand, palm up, and waited. She laid her fingers in his. "But you showed me different." He didn't offer comfort or correction. He didn't have to. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed the back of it, slow. Outside, spring crept forward through the dark, softening the ground, coaxing green from the branches. And inside, where the fire glowed low and steady, a woman once left behind and a man who had learned to wait sat close enough to hear the breath in each other's lungs, finding in that quiet all the proof they'd ever need. The morning Everett and Sierra rode out to clear the bend near Walnut Canyon, the sky was a calm slate gray and the wind moved low through the pines. Eli held the mule's rope with both hands, his face drawn with focus, while Lottie sat behind Sierra on the saddle, arms tight around her mother's waist. They'd left before first light, blankets packed with bread, dried peaches, and a wrapped tin of boiled eggs. The timberman, Mr. Harlan, waited near the creek with his sleeves rolled and a long-handled axe already sunk in a half-felled pine. His son, a quiet boy named Amos with a broad back and a missing front tooth, nodded once at Everett and set to work without a word. Sierra handed the children 2 wooden buckets. "Fill these from the creek, then find dry kindling for the fire." Lottie hesitated. "What if there's snakes?" Then you stomp loud and carry a stick, Everett said, handing her one. Snakes mind their own if you give them time. They worked all morning, the sound of axes biting would echoing through the canyon. Everett's shirt clung to his back before noon, and Sierra's palms blistered before the first pine came down. She didn't mention it, just tore a strip from her apron and wrapped her hand before lifting again. You've done this before, Harlan said to her, not unkindly. Not exactly, she replied, eyes on the next tree. But the doing's not much different than anything else that needs finishing. By early afternoon, they'd cleared enough to load the sled. Eli helped Amos tie the lengths with rope, his fingers moving slower but more careful than the older boys. Everett watched from a distance, noting how Sierra let the children try without stepping in too soon. When the last log was hauled up, Harlan turned to Everett. You've got good help. I don't often say that. Everett nodded once. They've earned every word. The ride back was quieter. Lottie dozed against Sierra's side, and Eli rode on the sled, legs dangling, eyes half-lidded but proud. At the cabin, they unloaded in the fading gold of late afternoon. The sky began to spit rain just as Everett lifted the final timber beside the barn's foundation. They covered it with canvas and hurried inside. That night, after the children had fallen asleep with their arms thrown wide in the tangle of quilts, Everett sat at the table sharpening his draw knife. Sierra poured warm water over her hands and dried them with the edge of her skirt. You ever think this would be your life? She asked, sitting beside him. Not this exactly, he said, but something quiet with meaning in it, that I hoped for. She turned her face toward the fire. I used to think peace was a stillness, but it's not. It's work that gives instead of taking. He set the blade down. You've built more of that here than I ever did. She looked at him then, steady. No, we built it. Together. He reached for her hand. You're not waiting for the ground to fall out from under you anymore. I think I finally believe it won't. Her voice softened. Not with you beside me. He stood and held out his hand. She rose without hesitation. In the corner of the main room, where the firelight caught on the wall, he turned her slowly in a quiet waltz. No music but the wind at the windows. Her bare feet brushed the floorboards, and her eyes never left his. When they kissed, it wasn't hurried or uncertain. It was the kind of kiss people give when there's no need to rush, when the promise has long since been made and they're just living in it. His hand settled at the small of her back. Her fingers curled at the base of his neck. Afterward, they lay beneath the same quilt, the rain soft against the roof. She curled into him, her breath even, the weight of the years before finally quiet. The barn was rebuilt by midsummer. The children painted their names into the inside of the door with leftover pigment, and Everett hung a small horseshoe above the entry for luck. Sierra planted corn along the edge of the field, and Eli helped her carry water from the creek each morning. Lottie found a stray cat that refused to leave and named it Thistle. One evening, as they watched the sun drop behind the ridge, Sierra leaned into Everett's side on the porch bench and said, I never thought I'd want to marry again. He looked down at her, waiting. But I want to marry you, she said. If you'll have me. He pulled a folded parcel from his coat pocket. A simple silver ring wrapped in cloth. I made this weeks ago, he said. Was just waiting for the right time. She laughed, breath-catching. Now seems about right. They married at the edge of the field with the pines behind them and the creek singing below. Harlan stood witness, and Amos held Lottie's hand while she scattered wildflowers from a basket. Eli stood beside Everett, proud and tall, his shirt tucked tight and his chin high. Sierra wore a blue dress she'd sewn from traded cotton, and Everett wore the same coat he'd worn the day they met, the cuffs mended by her own hand. When they kissed, it was under the open sky, with the smell of tilled earth and pine in the air and the sound of their children laughing in the grass. They never left the land again. Each season passed with its own rhythm, planting, tending, harvesting, mending. But through it all, they stayed together. Not just sharing a roof or a name, but building a life that held firm even in the wind. Years later, when the children were near grown and the trees behind the house had thickened with age, Sierra still reached for Everett's hand each night without needing to look. And every morning, before the sun crested the ridge, he still rose early to light the fire, so the house would be warm when she woke.